It's good to see that few people are here because what I'm going to say is relevant to the fact that we don't have enough people here. People like to interact. And so the coffee breaks are usually the occasion for them to get together and talk, so which is good. But it's good for those who are here, and we hope there will be more of them every year, every occasion. But on the other hand, we also want to interact with everybody in Africa and in the Arab world. And that's not easy to do because we can't bring them all here, offer them a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and see how well they interact. So we've had to design a new outreach program which is truly unique. In collaboration with our friends based in Pittsburgh, headed by Ron Laporte, and I can see here Faina Linkov, and I see François Sauer, I see Eugene there, so Shubnikov, and on our side, a team headed by Diana Shenawi over here, and let's see, I see Minna, I see Yasmin, I see a lot of our team on this side as well. These two teams have worked together to offer all of the interested communities of practice in Africa and the Arab world, all the professors in the different departments in the universities, those who work, for example, in agricultural research institutions, those who work in public health, etc., a vehicle by which we can inform and communicate with each other. And these we generally called the networks, the Library of Alexandria or the BVA networks for Africa and the Arab world. And the Arab world, I remind most people, including the Arabs all the time, that the Arab world is like almost 75% African, going down from Mauritania up to Morocco, across the northern part with Sudan, and then down on the other side all the way to Djibouti and Somalia, and then that's about 3/4 in population and in surface area. So we're thoroughly African above everything else. So what are we doing? Well, what we're doing, we're also decided to prepare a series of interconnected websites that will offer some general information that may be of interest and relevance to Africa. And with our teams on both sides, we have not only prepared the content of that material, but we also were able to create a very large set of networks of identified individuals that we can reach. And we have a smaller group with whom we physically interact and who will be presenting also some of the material. And these, we hope, will become the basic core of the content providers that will be reaching out to all those people through the internet. This first launch, which was done in connection with this conference, everybody being here, involves 500,000 people. And Ron and I are arguing about whether we're going to go up to 700,000 or 800,000. And he says, 2.1 million, make it 2.2 million. I said, well, maybe, but let's say right now that already if we have 500,000 people that we are reaching with this material and then engaging them in a dialogue, we are laying the foundations for effective networking with the communities of interest in Africa and a few in the Middle East. Now, this session, we will be hearing from multiple people, but we'll also, I think, have a chance to get to know what the websites are like and how to reach them and what to see in them. We wanted them to be informative, to be enjoyable, and also to reach the interests of the different communities, be they those who are concerned with public health, those who are concerned with agriculture, those who are concerned with environment, those who are concerned with IT, which are the 4 areas that we present in our science super course with 170,000 PowerPoint lectures available for free on all of these topics, or even those who are interested in research methods. And there we have another story, which was the Research Methods Library of Alexandria and the RMLA, and that has its own story as well. So these 5 broad areas are available, plus of course under a general portal, and I hope you will see them now. To continue chairing this session, I wanted to personally come and join you in saying how important this is for us and how committed we are to continue this with our friends based in Pittsburgh and extending all the way to Siberia, with our friends in Africa, and there's Musa and there's others who are already involved in that, and that we are making a very strong commitment to continue this, and that we've already reached 500,000 people in this first launch, and not anybody. As I said, professors at universities, researchers in research centers, etc., very appropriately the kind of people that we would like to reach. And so, without further ado, let me turn to a great friend, a man of enormous dedication and dynamism, a friend of many people, and who know him through his emails, and above all, for his having coined an interesting word, which is statophobia, people who are afraid of statistics. And he's trying to find cures for being a healer by original profession. So he will come. Of course, I'm introducing the one and only Ron Laporte. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much. We're very pleased to come to present to you about the Library of Alexandria, research methods, communities of interest, etc. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be giving to you a bit of a flavor of all the things that we're going to be doing, and we'd love to get you involved with this. And as you'll see, that our work is a little bit different than most other work, and we are successful because we're good friends, and so we're good friends across the world, and that's what makes good research, and that's what makes improvement of health and improvement of the environment for many reasons. Now, the first thing we're going to do is a little bit different, is that when we started out this project, the Research Methods Library of Alexandria and the GRID, one of our top people from Africa said, well, I'm a public health person, I'm a physician, but also I'm a poet. And so what Francis has done is Francis has written an ode to the research, and he's going to come up and read his ode, and you'll see the overview, and this gives you actually an overview of what we've been doing. Francis, where are you? Okay, Francis. Francis is a public health physician from Nigeria, and this is the first time I've met him, even though we've known each other for years.
Well, I think Salam Alaikum is in order. I hope. Yes, my name is Francis Ohanyido, and the poem I'm going to read is called The Grid. The Grid, I think Professor Laporte will talk more about the grid later, but it's a poem devoted to that. It goes thus. I feel the connection when we meet, connected for life in methods, before the smiling Imhotep, Charaka, Lazarsville, Kauchi, many more connected, many more faces are lit. Smiling down the hallways of thought, a quest for the light, long shining in our thoughts. We are here, bound by research, evolving the grid, lacing these web of minds, birthing ideas and innovation, forging the ank of wisdom in the great Library of Alexandria, where the walls know limitless scrolls and knowledge walks the hall. We are here, wed in communion of research, into communities of interest, a stimulus for cross-disciplinary inquiry, in tremulous dawn before the awakening, into the fellowship of the greed. We are here. It is here. Power of the greed. Dalo, thank you. Shukran.
Very good. Now, you have to admit that's cool. How many other people have a poem for their research? We've really enjoyed that. Okay, can you help me get mine up? Okay, my talk is a little bit less serious, and what I want to do is to give you a general idea from like a higher overview of what we've been doing. Okay, now, what I'm going to be talking about is giving you a quick overview of the Library of Alexandria, in African American countries. What I'm going to be focusing on is not just this, but really the power of the Library of Alexandria. Now, this is the Library of Alexandria. And basically, if you look at the Library of Alexandria, over the past 11 years, it's become very muscular in terms of the research, in terms of their knowledge, and all about Arabic history and history in general. But one of the difficulties of the Library of Alexandria in 2001 is that it didn't have a scientific arm. And so what we're doing is we're creating the scientific arm for the Library of Alexandria with the work that we've been doing, and basically trying to demonstrate to use this as a basis to improve productivity in the world, but also move up the status of the Library of Alexandria in research. If you're looking at scientific impact in the world of the major research institutions, you have the NIH, you have Wellcome Trust, you have the National Science Foundation. And right now, in 2001, the Library of Alexandria had very little scientific impact. We think that this can be greatly expanded, and we'll be showing you why. So here's the BVA on the right, and here's NIH on the left. And it's like, oh my God, look how big this are. And what we're going to be doing is basically competing with something like the NIH or NSF. And we're going to be taking them on. And here we are at the Library of Alexandria, making this one of the top research centers and scientific centers in the world. This is the Library of Alexandria. And the way we're going to approach this is that obviously we don't have money like the NIH or the NSF, but we're going to look at this like we're Apple. And what Apple said is we think differently. And that's the mission of what we're doing, is we're going to think differently about science and have an impact on science in a very different way than the major universities and the major research institutions in the world. Now think about this. What is at the heart of science? We talk about science, and we've all been doing science, but what is really at the heart and at the circle of science? Well, there's actually, as we envision it, there's three things that are at the center of science. One is libraries. You can't do science unless you have the libraries, and here we have the library. Here we have the Library of Alexandria. The second is scientists. Well, basically, you can't do science unless you have scientists. And the third is, in science, there are a certain set of research methods that cut across almost all of science. Well, and this is one of the problems that we've been talking about, is that the research methods are there. Well, if we can become one of the top libraries in the world, which you already are, if we can network the scientists in the world, which we're trying to do, if we can basically set up a system to help people with research methods, then we become at the heart of science and basically build a scientific capacity in a way that nobody else has done. So that we're looking at the potential scientific impact in the year 2020. What we hope to do is basically say, well, here's the Library of Alexandria. We are competing with the largest centers across the world. Now, well, it's a little bit difficult to compete, though, because NIH has $27 billion, and we have about $1.50. I mean, we don't have much resources, but still, with our partnership with the Library of Alexandria and our partnership and our people that we're collaborating around the world, we have one thing that the NIH doesn't have, and we have several things the NIH doesn't have. One is networks of people all around the world, the brand of the Library of Alexandria, and research methods. If you look at the world of science in 300 BC, here are some of the top researchers at the Library of Alexandria. And as you all know, the Library of Alexandria at this time was the leading scientific institution in the world. And the reason for it is that they were connected with all these scientists. We want to do the same thing. In the world of science now, in 2020 AD, we've been able to identify over 2 million scientists with email addresses. Well, what if we basically put the Library of Alexandria right in the middle of them? And if we do that, that's going to have a profound effect upon science, because we're connecting them all together from different disciplines, and the profound effect on the Library of Alexandria. And this, who presented this on the population of Arab countries? Well, we're seeing a major increase in population of these over time. We would hope to see a major increase in scientists over time and a major increase in publications over the time. So our goals of what we're planning to do is we want to make the Library of Alexandria at the center of African and Arabic and global science. Secondly, we want to help double the research productivity in Arab and African countries, and you'll be seeing this in several other presentations, the limited publication rates. So BA scientific power. The power of the BA is you got the library, you have the scientists of interest, you have the research methods. If we capitalize on these three, it will be it will be a very powerful research institute in the next few years. And so here's the library and the power of the library. And I thought it was kind of nice. This week in the United States is the National Library Week. It's a perfect time for us to come over and saying that libraries transform. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to transform science and scientists with libraries. And then what Diane is going to be presenting, this wonderful website that's just been created, is the BA African Networks. And it's really a beautiful site, and we're making this as a center of African science and also for Arabic science. The grid. This is one of the most powerful things we have, connecting the scientists of the world. And we've been very successful in identifying emails, Eugene and Faina, in terms of identifying scientists all across the world. Because if we have these people connected, then we can bring them together, because unity is power when we're dealing with this. If we have all these people on the grid and basically working together interdisciplinary, will be a unique opportunity. Now, Dr. Segladine is the key person. I mean, I've known him since the year 2000. We have Vince Cerf and I didn't put your name, Francois, I'm sorry, and Francois Sauer and Gil Ullman, who've been the developers of this. And the library grid is something we've spent a lot of time on in the communities of interest to basically network scientists across the different domains. So if we have a grid, and we started out with a grid about a few years ago in 1910, we can network people from all different disciplines and have them work together. Like, for example, we've been talking for a long time is how can we get epidemiologists and public health people working with agriculture people or genomics people? What we want to be able to do is basically bring the Library of Alexandria to the center of science. To bring the Library of Alexandria into the center of science, We bring Library of Alexandria into the center of scientists. So we want to be at the heart of scientists worldwide. The Library of Alexandria grid, which we'll be talking about quite a bit, we have 2.1 million people that we're in the process of connecting, far and away the largest network of scientists in the world. And what the Library of Alexandria has done is identified about over 165,000 PowerPoint lectures, which can form the content of teaching in the different areas of the communities of interest. Now, we became very interested in PowerPoint. The person on the far right, who you'll be hearing in a little bit, Musa, we created, and it showed the power of this, immediately after the Ebola, one of the first cases of Ebola appeared, we created a lecture. Actually, we didn't correct it. Musa created a lecture on Ebola. We put it up on the web. We translated it into these languages, a large number of languages, and it became the top lecture on the web for Ebola because it was scientifically sound and it was available to people very rapidly after the initial cases. So we want to double the research productivity in Arab and African countries. One of the ways is through frugal science. My field of epidemiology is a frugal science. And what I mean by that is it doesn't cost much to count dead bodies, and that's much of what we do in epidemiology. But sociology, linguistics, archaeology, statistics, and if you think about it, some of the major scientific findings in Africa, for example, Lucy, or Urdu, where these are the scientific heritage of science, and disappointingly, basically the Americans and English basically took credit for it for your science. But these types of things, these types of areas of science, you can readily convert them. And I looked at the British Medical Journal, and about 70% of the articles in the British Medical Journal could have been done in Egypt or could have been done in Kenya. So we want to build research capacity in developing countries. Now, this is a scared lady. And I coined this word, which I'm very proud of statophobia. And the reality is that we're all scared of statistics a little bit. I'm always, actually, having published over 500 papers, I'm still a little bit scared about statistics. But I can go down the hall and find a statistician within like 2 doors down. I mean, it's incredible. But if you're in Kenya, you may have to go find a statistician or a research person that's halfway across Kenya. And the problem with this is that there's extremely bright scientists in Egypt and Kenya and Nigeria, but very motivated too, but 80% of the time that an article is turned down because of research methods. So what we've developed is a place that people can go and get answers to the research methods questions. And statophobia is the fear of statistics and not having access to experts. And please use this word. I want everybody to use this word. It's very important. Okay, so the problem is that there's very little statistical capacity in developing countries. And basically, the result is poor research design and analysis and limited scientific publication. And you'll be hearing a lot more about this as we present. The Research Methods Library of Alexandria has 10 full-time research design courses. One of them is Dr. Segledine. It's got about 1,000 lectures. It's got an Ask a Research Librarian so that gray-haired, no-haired statisticians and research methodologists like me can answer questions for you. It's got what Faina is evolving is an African Arab scientific journal, hopefully at the Library of Alexandria. And we have a survey portal this is something anybody can use. And free textbooks and software. And this has become the largest research methods library in existence. In addition to the virtual aspect of this, We're in the process of collecting, we have promises of about 6,000 statistics and research design books that we're going to be bringing to the Library of Alexandria. So this will be the largest book and virtual statistic methods collection. And then basically what we're going to be hearing next is that we've been talking about how we can best develop capacity in other countries in Africa, and we ran across a wonderful discussion of this, and where Kenya is developing a beautiful model, which you're going to be hearing in just a second, that potentially, if applied to the rest of Africa, could be a major stimulus for improving science. So the library, our thoughts is that the Library of Alexandria Methods is everybody's library. And so what we want to do, and what we've been doing over the past year, is literally bringing the library in through the internet so that anybody can use this and get their questions answered for statistics. Now, if you're looking at now where we have the Library of Alexandria and Arab and African science, you look at the US and the EU science, I mean, it's really, really huge, and well, how can we compete with it? But the reality is we can compete. I thought this was cool. We can compete by basically working together and basically creating a way that we can take on the bigger entities, because we're covering a niche that no one has ever covered before. The BA Arab African grid. So within this grid, basically, we have the Library of Alexandria, we have the grid, BA grid with communities of interest, we have research methods, and what we have is a phenomenal group of people that are working on both sides. Eugene has been putting together this slide. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but we have people from around the world who are working with it, Diana's and basically the team here, and it's been an incredible, rewarding experience. And this is my wife and I, the first time we came to Egypt, and riding a camel up to the pyramids. It was quite enjoyable. Okay, great. We'll take the questions at the end, and let me introduce Yuma. And Yuma, where are you? Okay. Yuma is the Deputy Commission Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Commission for Education in Nairobi. I met him in Toronto, and he presented a presentation on the plan for higher education in Kenya and stimulating research and innovation, and it just blew me away because it was so well thought out. And he was one of the major architects of this.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Ron. I'll continue from where he has left, and I'll basically be describing the Kenyan university scenario and how we can build this community of science. So I work with the Commission for University Education, which is a government institution based in Kenya that registers and regulates universities in Kenya. And I'll be using the Kenyan example to say how we can use that model to develop the rest of the African university sector to increase research productivity. I'll start by saying a little bit about the Kenyan university arena. As you all know, Kenya got independence from Britain in 1963, now just over 50 years. And at that time, the country only had one university college with less than 40 students. 50 years down the line, 2016, now we have 500,000 students from 40 and 70 universities. So you can see that the growth is really phenomenal. And so we are estimating that by 2020, the combined undergraduate and postgraduate enrollment will hit 1 million. And what this means is that the university infrastructure, both human and physical, is under considerable pressure, and yet that infrastructure must continuously absorb increasing numbers of students. And so the challenge then we have, and this challenge is for Kenya, but I guess is the challenge that we have for the rest of the sub-Saharan Africa, is the challenge of how do you balance between access to university education, the relevance of that education, and the quality of the education being offered. And I think these are issues that we can all look at. Initially, when university education was established in Kenya, universities were extremely autonomous, with each university coming up with an act of parliament basically to regulate, launch programs, teach, research, award degrees. 50 years of experience showed that that was a good system, but definitely there were also challenges that were coming up in terms of the quality of education that was being offered, especially with universities opening up large numbers of campuses that they could not control and whose quality could not be verified. So in 2012, what the Kenya government did then is they enacted a new act, the Universities Act 2012, together with the regulations and standards to address the issues of quality, especially in the face of mushrooming university colleges in different towns. So we now have a rigorous accreditation and external quality assurance process that has been brought in as part of these reforms. One of the issues that faces Kenya, like many of the other sub-Saharan Africa countries, is qualified academic staff. So we have an aging infrastructure, and we have large numbers of students, and we do not have programs, PhD masters, that are producing enough lecturers to keep pace with what is going on at the universities. And so you find a professor or a lecturer that is teaching in 3 or 4, 5 different institutions, a culture that we call moonlighting. And this has then eroded the research culture. So we have younger, new academics that want to teach a lot more and involve themselves much less in research work. And so here now, the academic question we have is what is the balance between autonomy of a university and the quality of the products that they are offering in the market? And I think that is a debate that we can have. We have, out of the 70 universities that we have in Kenya, 34 are public and 36 are private. The public universities are large. Our largest university, University of Nairobi, has 80,000 students. And our smallest university, usually the private ones, it has about 200 students. But one thing that stands out is that in the public and private universities, the arts, humanities, business programs account for 80% of the admissions. And so we have lots of students in the universities taking educational programs, especially arts, humanities, and business, and a very small proportion, just about 20%, that are doing sciences. We also note that there's a lot of duplication between the programs that the universities are offering. And especially private universities, they rarely venture into postgraduate, master's, doctoral training, while the public universities have large numbers of programs, sometimes beyond the capacity that they have. And so we see that the choice of programs is driven more by economic rather than relevance, and also the competence and availability of resources at the universities. And so the challenge then is how do you promote more training of postgraduate, master's, PhD programs to support increasing numbers of students at universities. One of the things that Kenya has is what we call the Vision 2030. This is the dream of the country where we need to be in 2030. And basically it looks at increasing access, equity, quality, and relevance of university education, especially in areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so if you look at the country now, while we produce, so we have created a situation where we have students or graduates that do not have employment, but also we have employment that does not have people that will fill them up, especially in the areas of medical and engineering fields. And one of the other dreams is how to use ICT to carry out training, and also how to increase production of PhD graduates to match increasing student numbers. And so we have issues of balance between what the country needs in terms of what does the country need in form of graduates, and what are we training our graduates? What is the correlation between what the country needs and what our universities are producing? And so we also have an argument that universities need not necessarily produce for the market. So sometimes when we engage with universities, they will tell you it's not our business to produce for the market. So we will produce general graduates, and they have to find how to fit into that market. When you look at the Kenyan, when I talk about 500,000 students, it may look like we have a lot of students going to university, but in reality, the number of students that reach class 8, or what we call grade 8, is about 1 million. And 4 years down the line in grade 12, what you see there is only about 500,000. So 500,000 disappear between grade 8 and grade 12. And how many get admitted every year? Just about 100,000. So that is it's a system that is, again, fairly wasteful, and a lot of students then drop out on the way. So one of the issues that we've been trying to do is how do you collect then accurate data that will help you create relevant policies for the university sector and also regulate that sector. So we have developed a very rigorous system of collecting data and information about enrollment, professors, the programs being taught, finances, so that we are able to analyze and monitor in a holistic way what goes on within the universities. Because this then helps you to understand the sector that you are dealing with and helps you then bring in more accurate policies and regulatory frameworks that will support that environment. So one of the aspects that I see when you look at data at African universities is that sometimes you find a vice chancellor or a president of a university that does not even know how many students they have. So we think that we have some information that we can share in terms of how this can work. And so for improved planning and the policy making, it's paramount that we have accurate data about the sectors that we are dealing about. And the data that the tool that we have developed looks at everything from the number of campuses the university has, the programs that are on offer, how many are accredited, the student enrollment in each program by gender and by year of enrollment, and the number of professors, PhD, masters holders that are teaching in each of those programs, so that we are able to calculate the teacher-student ratio at in each program. And basically, what you see on the far left is a scorecard that then will tell you how you're doing if you are above the national average or you are below the national average in terms of the teacher-student ratios, the number of PhDs per student, and so on. And as I've indicated, this is a breakdown for 2015, 536,000 students. And you can see here that the majority, 473,000, are undergraduates, 54,000 masters, and only 6,735 PhD enrolled candidates at our local universities. And these are the staff establishments, 16,234, a majority of which, again, will be male. This is the distribution of universities within Kenya. As you can see, a lot of the distribution is such that the universities are concentrated around the capital city of Nairobi. And so we are also looking at, in terms of equity, who is being left out, who has access to university, who is very close to university, and who is too far from university education. This slide is very interesting because on the left, we are looking at, on the right, we are looking at the sectors that are driving the Kenyan economy, and this is what I had alluded to, that in 2013, for example, construction accounted for about 13.5%, finance and insurance 9.9%, human health, social sciences 8.9%, ICT, and what the universities are offering on their left. So you see that a lot of our programs are in business, education, humanities, and so on. And so what you see here is while the economy is going north, the universities are going south. And the issue is then how do you bring these interests together so that you are able to respond to the needs of the country. And this just illustrates the same, that you can see it is enrollment in different programs across the universities in Kenya, and you can see arts, business, again, taking a lion's share. In terms of publications, we see again that the country in the last 10 years has recorded tremendous improvement, 10% increment in terms of publications. If you look at 2006, the country was producing just about 600 papers in peer-reviewed and accredited journals. Now we have an accreditation system for journals within Kenya, and this has increased to about 2,000, which is a good increment, but we still think that a lot more needs to be done. And so the challenge is, how do we get more people publishing out of this system? And so you can see that when we come to undergraduates, there's a lot of graduates, and when you reach the PhD level, that this becomes extremely scarce in terms of who is graduating. And improvement in the number of scholarly publications for Kenya has been attributed to a number of factors. One is, of course, improved awareness on the need for increased publishing. The other one is rapidly expanding education system, which I've already alluded to, and there are also increased opportunities for electronic publishing, which were not there before. But we also have very deliberate government and university policies that have put emphasis on the need for researchers and university professors to publish. But then when you analyze who is publishing, this is very interesting, that we find that agriculture and biological sciences is doing very well, medicine, immunology, environmental studies, social sciences. So you find that the people who have a lot of students, the business, the IT, the arts and humanities, when it comes to publishing, then they disappear. And this is where we have large numbers of students and also ostensibly professors. This graph indicates the blue line, the number of published papers over the last, since 1996, and the orange line shows how the documents are being cited. And these are documents, this is publications in peer-reviewed journals and also in accredited journals. And this I've already indicated, who is publishing. You can see that this is mostly in medicine and that kind of biological science. When you look at the postgraduate research training, I just wanted to mention something about masters and PhD, that the appetite for masters and PhD training is really been increasing with time. You can see that's how it looks like. Currently, as I said, we have 54,000 master students, 6,000 doctoral students, but the number of supervisors is not keeping pace with these increasing numbers. And so you look like chewing more than you can successfully swallow. And we also think that this supervision skills is wanting, so that you have, the students are taking longer than we have intended to, 3 years, and the dropout rate is also quite high. That at the PhD level, we have over 50% of the enrolled graduate students are dropping out of programs, and many of them are also taking longer than the prescribed time. And so we think there's need for capacity to be built around issues of how do you supervise graduate students. When you look at the African scene, this was the Kenyan scene. The African scene is not very different from what you have seen in Kenya. In 1960, Africa had about 57 universities. And now we have 1,639 universities in 2015. And we can see gross enrollment in, that this is the number of people between 18 and 24 years that are enrolled. In 1970, only 0.74% of that cohort was enrolled in universities. In 1990, this had increased to 5%, and currently, as we speak, about 12% of Africans between 18 and 24 years are going to university. And the current situation, Africa, as you know, contributes about 12% of the world population, but if you compare the percentage of universities that we have, it's only 8.7% of the universities in the world. And so the issues that we are discussing in terms of rapid expansion, low enrollment of women at the universities, sustainable financing of both private and public universities, governance issues, linkages to an industry that is also struggling to come up, and these are issues that then we have. And the question is, how do you then build globally competitive universities for Africa so that Africa can produce manpower that can play a role in transforming the economy. And so to support that kind of, especially the publishing aspects, we have this dilemma then, how do you get policies that will support people to research and publish? And what I indicate here is we need good policies, we also need standards, we need regulations, we need a mechanism that will reward outstanding research, have national systems that absorb, because there's no point carrying out research that nobody's disseminating, nobody's is adopting. So we need to see how our research systems can link with technology producers, so that we are able to move into that continuum. What I see in Kenya is several institutions have played a role in improving research productivity and publishing. This has been Parliament in terms of the laws that have been produced, the regulations that I've already indicated to, and we also have a national incentive system where if you publish, you are able to be given incentives, and also I've mentioned about technology dissemination. And we also have a university harmonized criteria on appointment and promotion of university professors that applies both in public and private universities. And this criteria looks at your research productivity as one way of either admitting you into a professor as a professor at a university or promoting you from where you are. And as we stand now within Africa, Kenya is contributing about 8.4% of all the published scholarly papers. But in terms of citations, this is quite fairly high, 12.3. So it means the quality of the papers being produced is fairly high. But we need to enhance this. We see South Africa is doing extremely well, Egypt, Nigeria, Algeria, Morocco. These are like the stars of this continent in terms of productivity when we look at what is coming out. And within Kenya, I've indicated that people are publishing because of promotion opportunities. Students are also required to publish before they graduate as master's or PhD students. There are quite a number of funding opportunities, the issues of ranking and rating of programs and universities, national policies that support the same, and so on. And some of the questions that we have been asking is, do we need an African-wide ranking and rating system that will then put our universities on a competitive edge, and so on. Some of the disincentives that I've already indicated is the research resources are difficult to come by, excessive teaching loads, lack of support for research at many levels, and sometimes low uptake of research findings, as well as academic freedom that does sometimes not emphasize some of this, and also conflicting laws that we've had in my country, some promoting, some not promoting what is happening. We also lack appropriate journals for Africans to publish, and so sometimes people are being held back by cost. You want to publish in a good journal, but it costs good money. And so what do we need then? To build a truly sustainable and resilient research system for Africa, we need policies and laws, and I've already indicated that we also need infrastructure that can support the research we are trying to do, and also the human capital that is properly with research methods like he has described, they are able to do that, and incentives to support that kind of structure. And so, in conclusion, I have already indicated that in Africa here, for us to move forward, we need a balance between access, relevance, and the quality of our education, a sustainable financing system for both university education, for research and postgraduate training, debate on how much autonomy can you give and how much regulation do you give to universities, and the promotion of postgraduate research training, both the quantity and the quality of postgraduates is important, and promoting research, innovation, and linkages with industry that is fairly emerging, and the issues of skills mismatch, what the economy needs and what we are producing. In terms of accurate data, how do we know what is existing at our universities and what we need to do to improve the situation, and improved funding and networking for research and outreach, as well as inclusion of Africans in the diaspora. We have a large number of Africans that are in the diaspora that can contribute to research and training at African universities. And of course, sharing and networking best practices, what is working in Nigeria that Kenya needs to borrow what's working in Ghana, that Egypt needs to borrow, and I think that way we can build good institutions that will serve this continent. And so, closer home, and I'm just about to complete, that we are jumping through landmines. African university education is fairly young, and I'm hoping that working through the Library of Alexandria that we are able to develop the research methods that we have already mentioned, building the capacity of researchers, networking of African scientists, and even sharing at conferences so that we can improve the research productivity of the continent. And for this debate, we have a conference that is coming up in Kenya on 22nd to 26th of August, and I want to invite all of you to Kenya. There's an email there if you want to participate, and this will be focusing on African higher university education and how we can build a resilient university system that will support the growth of Africa in the long term. And you've already seen this picture, and one of the things that we appreciate is while Africa is grappling with these issues, our university system is not very old compared to what we have elsewhere. So we really will have to be patient, but we must also be persistent in building institutions that will transform this continent. And when we talk about university education, sometimes we forget where we have come from, that this is the building material that we use for building and getting university students. And you can see if the start is difficult, sometimes the end is bound to be a lot more difficult. And thank you for listening.
Thank you all. It's good to be back again. This is not just a grade this time. We are going to be talking on why publications in Africa are so limited. I will move very quickly because I think you saviors have said quite a number of things I will have to say in this slide. By way of background, what do we know about publications? Why publications are so limited in Africa? We will discuss that. And what do we not know about this state of affairs? Basically, one thing that stands out most of the time when you discuss research publications in Africa is the issue of poverty. It's still a very strong issue among the issues among majority of researchers in Africa. It's something we need to also think about. But you can see my thinking man there. He says around the ideas that we're able to generate towards moving the research programs in Africa, we have to look at inspiring the newer generation. We have to look at teamwork. We have to look at creativity. Basically, that brings the issue of innovation. And then, of course, for us to get success, all these things have to come together. You can see he's still thinking around it, but let's move on. How Africa publishes. If you look at this, it's a form of pictorial diagram with Africa, the map of Africa. You can see that there's a very prominent one there towards the center, which is Nigeria. It shows that Nigeria is publishing. South Africa is also publishing. It's publishing so much that it doesn't even appear here because the height is beyond this pictogram here. So basically, this looks at sub-Saharan Africa in terms of distribution, in terms of publication, and all that, And it also looks at issues around gross domestic product, vis-a-vis publication output per country. But basically, what is very obvious there is that South Africa, Nigeria, and of course, Kenya are publishing. And then you have some other countries like Cameroon, you have Senegal. Yes, they're all publishing. And over the past 10 to 12 years, there's been marked improvement in terms of publishing. But that could also be debatable. The basis for that improvement, it could be in terms of numbers because of more output in terms of professionals in the scientific arena. But what the numbers look like also, we can also say in terms of researchers per million inhabitants, we can look at, you can see the distribution there is quite obvious that South Africa still leads there, followed by Senegal. Then you can now talk about Gabon, Cameroon, but also remember that this is vis-a-vis population, so the numbers vis-a-vis population, so it's very important. For Nigeria, it's quite small there because our population 100 and now about 170 million thereabout. is significant. And then the number of researchers here also looks at, in terms of the number of researchers itself within the countries. And in fact, South Africa still carries the ball. Nigeria comes second, then you look at Senegal, then you look at Cameroon, you look at Kenya, and then Tanzania. Speaks a lot. But then in terms of other numbers, I mean, AIDI puts African scientists to be around 350,000. But that has also been an issue. Who is a scientist is something that we can debate, because, for example, there are doctors that work, medical doctors, work in clinical setting, for example. A lot of them do research. Then there are some doctors that don't do research. So do you lump all the numbers of, for example, medical doctors in a country as scientists and expecting them to publish? So those things are some of the idiosyncrasies around this. The number of scientific papers produced by Africans, 2003 to 2013, which is about a decade long, from the World Bank and Elsevier and all that, shows that it's the region of 55,000 plus, you know. And Africa accounts for 2.4% of the world's total in that same decade. The quality is improving too, it's quite obvious. And then the number of journals, like someone pointed out earlier on. 1 in 3, this will interest a lot of our people here. 1 in 3 researchers in Africa is a woman, which is also improving. But then if you look at gender inclusion in terms of all this, you find out that in terms of numbers, South Africa is leading there, and then Egypt, which is impressive, and you have Kenya. Nigeria is not even among the main leaders in this one, so it's understandable. But then the other, this thing also go to buttress that. Then annual PhD outputs and targets. Basically, the African Union does not have a target. And we don't even have African Union numbers in terms of output. So you can see basically, but roughly, IDEA put the output to be about something in the region of close to 9,000 PhD outputs, you know, in Africa. And South Africa has clear, both in terms of annual output, has information around that, as well as in terms of targets. South Africa is looking at a target of about 5,000 by 2030, PhD output annually. Currently, they have in the region of 1,005. Nigeria does not have a target for PhD outputs, and Nigeria produces close to 1,000 PhDs annually. So you see, and many other African countries, they don't have information about what's going on in terms of their PhD output, if you can use that as an index of, in terms of what we call scientists, you know, and all that. So researchers in R&D per million, you find out that Egypt leads in this, the continent, and this is an average, World Bank average, between 2001 and 2010, you know, and Ethiopia is there. It's about somewhere around 40. Egypt is somewhere around 500 plus, and South Africa is in the region of 400. Africa, the information is it's not available to. We need to start having an African kind of information so we can use it to benchmark this progress and all that. What we know as influences, disparity in scientific output across the country is an influence, because in itself, when you look at it, you can actually begin to think, okay, this is what the issue is here, this is what the issue is here, and then you can work towards an agenda for your research and all that. People have talked about neocolonialism of science, helicopter science, hijack and all that, but then in itself, if you really look at it, there's a flip side to it, because it has actually enhanced output in Africa. But we'll not go into that debate here. Internationalization of higher education is important, because now the global environment ranks universities, and it's important that universities should be able to see themselves as part of the globalization process in terms of education. Then, so they tend to perform to be able to also gain fundings and all that, you know. So mobility of target population, a lot of young people in Africa these days travel a lot for education, you know, so there's a competing need to increase your edge to be able to get some of these young people into your university. So it influences the issue of, and to be ranked comes down to that. Then competition for funding. Top-ranked universities push for academic quality and productivity at all levels. But maybe they are not doing enough from what is coming out. So these are other influences. Of course, there's including the issue of attraction of young PhDs to big industry. That's very common in Nigeria. Somebody who is a computer scientist, for example, would prefer to work in the oil industry in Nigeria rather than doing research somewhere in an academic environment because it pays him better, you know. So some of those things are there. So what we do not know, let's take them from two sides. The number of publications in many countries, is it due to paucity of number of researchers or the lack of productivity? Second one, are African ministries ready to navigate the competing higher education visions to achieve sustainable development and research paradigms? We don't know. So what are really the causes that impede Africa's publication output? We look at them from an analytical framework that looks at the systemic and the individual levels. Okay. Yeah, so this is basically from most of the studies we looked at were from 1996 to date, which is about 2 decades, and we also inferred that relatively low output of publication across Africa may have more reasons beyond the ones commonly suggested by most studies. Systemic level, scholarly economy is very important. If you look across all the countries that have done very well in terms of publications, it comes out that enabling environment, like Eusebius pointed out for Kenya, the issues of policies, the issues of laws, the statutes that enhance publications and bring about higher quality and quantity too in terms of scholastic systems, output, and all that. So, because it's an environment for broader business marketplace, so it's important that the enabling environment plays a critical factor in it. So, we also talk about what drives this scholarly economy, the factors around it. Could be around issues, how well we apply frugal science, like Ron pointed out, how to do research at low threshold budgets and all that. Research and development partnership with private sector is very important. Then gender inclusion is very critical because it's becoming more and more obvious that the women are becoming a powerhouse in themselves in the African continent in terms of productivity. Then we looked also the systemic level from the institutional level, organizational factors, such as research culture. When I was young, I'm still relatively young. You see that stamp there? When I was in secondary school in Nigeria, the stamp there was most of my mates always looked at that stamp. We always wanted to wear those white coats and become scientists. So a culture of science can actually start from just something as simple as a process that is called the broken window hypothesis. So getting young people to begin to look at the issues, that culture should start very early, not when someone is at higher level of education and all that, Then cross-country institutional collaboration is also very important around systemic issues, and optimization of young researchers' potential is key. Many of the presenters yesterday talked about this, and it's very important, especially looking at the population, the dynamics and demographics of population in Africa. Yeah, talking about that cross-country collaboration, if you look at this particular slide, you see countries. You see, of course, one point there, you saw like a grid, or you can see like a grid. But the interesting side is that you can see some parts of the lines joining those countries are thick. Some are light. The thickness is also a factor of collaboration, inter-country, cross-country, science without borders kind of thing. So when you look at it, you see in African continent, most of the collaborations are around South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, Lesotho, Swaziland. The thickest this thing. So it also goes to show why, or may point to why South Africa has a higher productivity level in terms of publication too. Because the more collaboration you have, the more you are able to probably get your acts together and produce more. And then you notice that when it comes to around, Egypt collaborates more with Libya in terms of that, and Sudan, Algeria. But I think the thickness is more between Libya and Egypt in terms of that study, between that window. Then, of course, there's the other parts of the continent. I will not go into detail, but I think the lines are there. Tunisia, Mauritania, you can see that the thickness increases around those ones. Then Kenya collaborates with so many countries in Africa, which is very impressive. So Kenya, that also may also show why Kenya is in terms of that. But the hub of productivity in terms of trans-border or trans-country productivity is around the southern SADC area. So individual level, I mean, this is neither here nor there per se, but what is obvious is that passion and interest in the discipline also can engender productivity. I'm sure that is a no-brainer. Poverty is a factor, like I started this whole talk with. Then, of course, ambitions, short-term trainings are important. Your ability to overcome even statophobia from an organizational level and then institutional level is important. Of course, the other issues, social issues, then, of course, academic factors, your age, your career rank, your need to publish so you will not perish, those kind of things. Then statophobia, most of all, is an enemy of the scholar. So I'm sure I will not belabor that. But then what we also notice that there are paradoxes in the system. As much as we said that the continent in terms of education, higher education has moved a bit, there's still a lot of disconnects, which are remarkable, relating to economic progress. Let's say Nigeria, for example. Nigeria has the biggest GDP in Africa now. It rebased its economy and found out that it was miles away from South Africa in terms of GDP. But has that translated in terms of programs at higher education to be able to improve scholastic outputs? No, it hasn't. So some of these paradoxes are there, Do we replicate the Kenyan model? That's open for debate. Do we need an African strategy for scientific research? Maybe, but that's something at the level of the AU, African Union, or regional bodies like SADC or ECOWAS or any other one that can push that. So strategies too are important, and these are paradoxes because most universities don't actually have a strategy around institutional output for research and all that. They are defective in many. Then enabling environment, of course. Eusebius talked a lot about that. What needs to change? Well, I'll not go into the details, but one critical thing stands out. Linkages and mentoring architecture is very, very important. And, of course, change in scholarly economy, the way we apply frugal science, is very important. It's not everything that has to be procurement-based. We can actually approach scholastic learning from a frugal level where it costs us less, low threshold kind of science. What can be done? It is more about redesigning the wheel, not reinventing the wheel. So from that point, what can we do? Actions that can rapidly, inexpensively, and markedly improve research? Yeah. Eliminate statophobia to start with. Movement towards frugal science. We need to start thinking and innovating around that. We need to know that there are certain comparative advantages in Africa. For example, the issue of Lucy. For example, the Australopithecus afarensis that was discovered 32 years ago, in Africa. It was more or less around frugal science. It didn't take millions to discover Lucy, Then, of course, mixed model approaches in terms of how we approach quantifications, research, and all that. So that's where research method comes in. It's very important that people get it right so that they can spend less and get more effective research output in terms of productivity there. We say helicopter science. I said it's both ways. Collaboration is very important. But when we have clear ideas about how we can do research with the West, North-South collaboration that is clearly productive, we can leverage on that to produce more, and that is where the grid comes in. So mainstream and African diaspora strategy for science. A lot of countries, like Nigeria, for example, have a lot of professionals like in the United States. So how can we, without moving them physically back to the motherland, to be able to tap into their wealth of experience and knowledge base? Very important. So knowledge management is key to all this. So it comes down to the grid again. So we have to also learn to reduce plagiarism. People reproduce all sorts of other people's materials across the continent in order to publish and not perish. We need to stop that. There are many ways we can bring about with the ubiquity of information communication technology and even open source applications for that. We need to strengthen African research methods of Library of Alexandria, which is why we're here. And we're here in Library of Alexandria, you're here. We have so many generations of scientists in this room. So we need to start thinking about how all these factors can come together. It's a discussion, not for one day, but I think so many things are coming up. Then we talk about the B-African networks, like Ron pointed out. It's about grading, networking, and a new frontier of science in Africa. And in conclusion, I want to say that the best and fastest strategy to scale up scientific publications is to reduce dataphobia by exploiting frugal science through increased peering, enhancing learning within communities of interest, promoting research methods early in academic life with improved access to qualitative mentoring. That is very important. This will help overcome the basic bottlenecks and help promote research and publications, as well as strongly promote intergroup collaborations across the region. We also advance that current bottlenecks offer a great opportunity to leverage cost-effective models to overcome publication inertia. It's possible, and we can continue looking at how best to move this model forward, but the evidence on ground that we can actually do it. It is critical that we increase research capacity for Africa particularly, especially which are locally relevant, because that's the key. We can do all the research in the world in Africa, but if it's not relevant to us, if it's not relevant to how the Aswan Dam can be more effective in terms of agriculture here, then it becomes totally nonsense. So we have to have the picture we want in Africa in terms of research output, research and development, and how it applies to our daily life. We can think globally, we can apply locally. It's very important. So what do I say to you? Power up Africa, power up the grid. Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is Musa, who is a friend of mine who I just met, who basically saved us because we needed to do something on Ebola, and he did a fabulous job. Musa?
The director of Bibliotheca Alexandrina, distinguished scholars here present, students and colleagues, thank you very much for giving us the honor to make this presentation. What is man's place in time? At every point in man's history, man is between the past and the future. Man has always attempted to adapt and develop the environment for his welfare. Hence, the constant drive for artistic, scientific, and technological improvement. And documentation of these lessons has been what successive civilizations have been doing. The more man knows, the more he is better equipped in becoming adept in facing the challenges of his environment. But then, the challenges keep coming, and therefore, man has to keep learning in order to survive in his environment. And that has been the story of man. Unfortunately, today, history has placed us with the burden of unequal knowledge, technology, and development in the different regions of the world. The reality of this unequal development is summarized in this quotation by our dear director of Bibliotheca Alexandrina in a Nature article from October 2008. He said, in their fight to raise living standards and realize the economic and social potential in the coming decades, there is one thing the developing countries cannot do without: homegrown capacity for scientific research and technological know-how. Increasingly, a nation's wealth will depend on the knowledge it accrues and how it applies it, rather than resources it controls. The haves and the have-nots will be synonymous with the know and the know-nots. What does Africa know and what does Africa publish? I am an epidemiologist. In epidemiology, we study and analyze the frequency, distribution, and determinants of health and disease in defined population. And I may add, we use this knowledge to control diseases in our populations. So in the context of this presentation, we refer to the frequency, distribution, and determinants of scholarly publications in Africa. My colleague, Dr. Francis Ohaido, has extensively discussed about the determinants of scholarly publications. So I will dwell on the other aspects of the epidemiological paradigm that we adopted for making this presentation. Now, what is the methodology of measuring African publication? Because when we keep mentioning numbers about research productivity, how is this measurement done? This is an African publication. Could this have been a blog? Could this have been a chronicle of what happened during a pharaoh's lifetime? But today, we have a reality which all academicians are faced. Does a blog count as being published? Certainly not. So what is publication? Published documents consist of all types of documents that include citable and non-citable documents derived from bibliographic databases containing abstracts and citations of academic journals. And one of such bibliographical databases is Scopus, and it has the added advantage of including addresses of all collaborating authors. And it is from this that we can now define who is an African author. And therefore, we define an African author as an author or authors who comprise of all those whose affiliation indicates an African country address. From that, we can be able to derive the publication rate, which is the annual measure of a country's publication output. And this number of publications per country reflects the number of scholars present in that country, the number of articles they submit, and of course the acceptance rate, which is eventually what gets published and we see. There are different bibliometric indices, and they seek to measure quantity and the impact of scientific publications, and they are one of the most frequently used indicators of research and development output, and this is why we are dwelling on publication. Now, what has been the frequency of publication in Africa? What is interesting is that in less than 2 decades, Africa has moved from a mere 10,430 publications and made a 5-fold improvement to 52,826 publications between 1996 and 2013. This is a great improvement, but it still rates very low by international standards. On this table, there are 2 factors we should look at: the world share of publications and the world share in research and development expenditure. We can see that Africa is still ranking very low. This data shows that in 1990, Africa accounts for 1.4% of all publications in the world. In the year 2000, it remained the same. And when we look at the share in research and development, rather than improving or remaining static, there's a reduction. Of course, economic factors may be playing a big role in determining how much governments are willing to invest in research and development. It is obvious that developing countries, particularly those in Africa, produce fewer publications than they could. From the table that I just showed, Africa, in addition to the other developing countries in Asia, produce only 25.7% of all publications in the world. And in this part of the world, we have 80% of the population and 28% of scientists living here. This particular slide has been shown before, but let me give a different story. Imagine this is the city of Alexandria. When you take a stroll around it, you see skyscrapers. The taller the skyscraper, the more publication a particular street or a particular building is contributing to the landscape of that city. South Africa and Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and many countries obviously dominate the landscape. But then the Egyptians that are here will be wondering, where is Egypt? Later this evening, my colleague Iman will be making a presentation that will focus on research productivity in the Arab world, and Egypt indeed was included there. We know that physically Egypt belongs in Africa, but Scopus decided to include Egypt in the Middle East. So much of my presentation will exclude the data from Egypt, but later we'll have that data to show how productive Egypt is. Now, these are the power countries, the top 10 countries in Africa that are producing most of the publications. South Africa, as we can see, is there at the top, followed by Nigeria, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda, Cameroon. This has been the consistent pattern for 18 years. And the same is seen when we look at citations from top journals. Earlier, my colleague, Dr. Eusebius, mentioned that, yes, Kenya is lower when we look at the total number of publications, but when we look at citations, which is further an indicator of the quality of publications that I made, we can see that the height of Kenya is quite high. But then the other countries that are here too are making good contributions. When we look at subject areas, only 5 subjects actually account for about 70% of all the publications that we are seeing. Medicine on its own accounts for 30.3%, followed by agriculture, 19.6%, engineering, 11.6%, arts and humanities, 3.3%. Okay, before then, computer science, 7.2%, arts and humanities, and finally, energy. But we've been talking of collaboration. We've been talking about scientists thinking together, working together to come up with solutions to our problem. How active are we in multidisciplinary publication? It's just 0.9%. So it means there is no much collaboration going on in terms of scientists working in different fields, looking at different dimensions of a problem, and therefore publishing together. Now, why do we publish? Publish or perish? When we look at the brief history of scientific publication, the first scientific journal was Philosophical Transaction, published by the Royal Society in 1665. Fast forward to about 300 years later, if we look at the right-hand side of this graph, we can see that in 1970, that is just about 300 years later, we now have over 8,000 scientific journals that are published worldwide. 30 years later, in the year 2000, but precisely in 2011, we have 31,758 journals. So there has been a bust in options for scientists to publish. And that is why when we look at the left-hand side of the chart, we can see that in the year 2002, which is about 14 years ago, there were 1,000,009 journal articles that were published in that year. 8 years later, in 2010, it jumped up to 1.94 million articles published in that year. So it means we are publishing a lot. And with this publishing, it means that the researchers worldwide are very active. And with this activity, people are beginning to say that publish and perish, is it good? And that is why people are beginning to associate it with salami publication, least publishable units, fraud, plagiarism, honorary or gift authorship, fabricated peer reviews, article retractions, and the growth of predatory journals. However, in a recent article that we published in the British Medical Journal, we argue that publish or perish is good for African science. As of today, there is no data on risks and benefit. There is no conclusive data on the risk and benefit of publish or perish. Even if it is there are studies that are not randomized controlled trials or systematic reviews that will give us very good conclusive evidence to say that publish or perish is not good. So we believe that in Africa, when we provide cost-effective incentives to encourage publication in top journals, it will help African science achieve its potential. And in the future, when we are beginning to see results from countries like Kenya, where they are having such incentives for their scientists, we will be able to have data to support this hypothesis that we are proposing. So in the African context, we have to understand that research cost is cheaper, but researchers are insufficiently motivated. The benefits of a regulated publish or perish system may outweigh the associated problems. By simply tying a researcher's promotion to the number of publications and to the impact factor of the journals in which they appear can improve the quality and quantity of published research without any significant rise in funding. We believe that this will encourage competition among scientists who are trying to get the incentive. And it has been demonstrated in Latin America during the 1990s, the scientists who are working in the national science development programs contributed to a bust in publications in those countries without any significant increase in funding. So if we are to replicate the same in Africa, we are hoping that that will encourage us to have an increase in publication rate. But who are producing knowledge? These are scientists who are working in research institutions with rules and regulations. And the reality of an academician is that for you to get a higher position, you need to publish. For you to get more funding, you need to publish. And for you to publish, you need data. So we are caught up in this cycle. And for us to produce and make Africa great, we have to keep calm, publish, or perish. So how can the Research Methods Library of Alexandria boost research productivity in Africa? We live in an age of virtual schools, libraries, and teachers. I don't have to be with Professor Ron Laporte in Pittsburgh, or with Final Linkoff in Pittsburgh, with Eugene in Russia, with Francois in Switzerland, or with my colleague Dr. Eusebius in Kenya, or with many great scientists who are in the audience here. I don't have to be with you. All I need is internet access, and I can be able to interact with you. So the Research Methods Library of Alexandria is using the reality of our times to see how we can make a difference. Much has been written about improving scientific productivity in Africa with a cry for more funding. However, it is unlikely that a large amount of scientific funding will be forthcoming. Therefore, we advocate that realistic and sustainable solutions be adopted by countries and institutions. How can we assist the African scientists to publish in top journals like Nature, Science, Cell, BMJ, Lancet for those who are in the medical or natural sciences, or in other top journals for those in arts and humanities and other areas of scientific endeavor, like machines for those in computers? The reality is that you have to submit your paper, and this is what happens. There is a peer review mechanism that ensures that only high quality and well-prepared articles are accepted in top journals. So we can see people with clubs, those are the peer reviewers, who will not allow your article to get accepted until it meets the minimum scientific standards of our time. And it is documented that most rejected articles fall down on their research methods, knowledge and skill that is urgently needed in Africa. The Library of Alexandria has launched an initiative, the Arab and the African Research Methods Library of Alexandria, to provide global expertise in research methodology and nurturing scientific communities to foster mentoring and interdisciplinary collaboration. The website will be presented, the updated and very beautiful website will be presented shortly. And in that website, we have archived lots of materials on research methods that is available for everyone on the continent to use and improve on the skill of research methods. In addition, RMLA has already identified and reached more than 50,000 faculty members and students in African universities and research institutions, and we're expanding. We have established a help desk and a mentoring system that pairs mentees with mentors. We have fostered collaboration with global institutions like Biometric Society and Statistics Without Border for partnership and sharing of resources. In conclusion, Africa has experienced increase in publications over time, but have we made any tremendous change? Obviously not. So we are advocating improved research methodology capacity and a regulated publish or perish policy for boosting African research. What is certain is that Africa urgently needs research to promote development. We need incentives that reward our most productive researchers and institutions at institutional or country level. This is my team, whom I am most appreciative because they have encouraged me, they have provided a lot of material in the production of my presentation. I want to specially thank Dr. Ismail Cyril Geldin, the director of Bibliotheca Alexandrina, for providing the leadership that has driven us to be great. This afternoon he said something and I will forever remember, you should have the spirit of to do. And I encourage all of us, the young ones, to have that spirit of to do. Thank you. Shukrullah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the problem with it being such a late time, why don't you try and catch, if you have a question, catch the speakers, or why don't you come to the session that's going to be beginning in a few minutes. We haven't had time to have Diana give her presentation, basically show you the website, but we'll do that first of all in the next session. Okay. Thank you very much.